What's good, y'all? Your boy Justin Henry here. Wednesday, October 30th, week 9. It is week 9. We got Stardom, Sit 'em coming your way. Obviously, this is the longer episode. So, you know what I'm saying? Ain't gonna be no timestamps. Ain't gonna be nothing but them little bars on the bottom. Y'all just gonna have to get used to it and like it. All right? We got 15 games, to cover. We got two teams on bye. And a lot of injuries, obviously, that kind of make even my job a little harder right now at this time of the year. And I know for you, makes your lineup decisions very tough, especially as we go through the week. So I'm going to dissect these matchups and talk about all circumstances, right? So if I see an injury at the quarterback position, I'm going to talk about what I think that could mean for the rest of the positions, right? If there's a receiver missing, which on a lot of these teams, there are some receivers out. Running backs, some of them are coming back. We're getting some backups even back in the fold now. So there's going to be some value here that's going to be a little fluid. Just know that and be willing to adapt, all right? I don't even want to turn on the intro because there's got a player in here that we're not going to be talking about this week because he got benched. But we got to play the intro. You already know what it is. Justin Henry Show, dubs in the chat, baby. And I'm going to tell you this. You ain't got to agree with everything I say. Just remember that I said it. All right? Just remember that. Justin Henry Show, where champs begin. Never fall off, only lock in. From draft day to Sunday night. Advice on point, cashing everything inside. Welcome to the show. Winners get they shine on. Breaking down plays, fantasy, my mind on. Remember to take, spin it back. Know to start a show with W's in the chat. Never settling for less, always raise the bar. Don't take offense, call your favorite try hard. NEL taking turn to life lessons. All about a buck in here like Mike Evans. Bijan with the big games, ain't no fumble. Underrated like Kamara. Still humble. Daily show beats mode every single week. About to change the game. AR-15. Justin Henry Show when champs begin. Never fall off. Only lock in. From draft day to Sunday night. Advice on point. Cashing everything inside. Welcome to the show where winners get they shine on. Breaking down plays. Fantasy my mind on. Remember to take. Spin it back. Know to start a show with W's in the chat. Dubs in the chat, baby. Hopefully y'all are winning your leagues right now, even though Anthony Richardson is benched. I'm about to change that song, bro. We're going to get a mid-season adjustment to that song. You know what? Maybe I'll work on that over the next week or so, man. We got to get a mid-season adjustment to that song. Shout out to y'all for dropping in the chat a little early. Obviously, I know I'm going to get a lot of start and sit questions, but I will not answer those until the end of the show today at best. I may even have to skip some of that today. Jahan, hope all is well, brother. Should I trade Tillman for ETN? I think this is kind of a wash at this point. I'd rather have ETN because the upside, name value wise, the upside is there with ETN. So if he does earn his role back, if Tank Bigsby does go back to a backup role, now you have a running back in a season where running backs are going down very quickly. But B, you have a better trade piece as well if needed over the next couple weeks. So I like Tillman. Think he's a wide receiver 3 right now, but I think ETN I'd rather have than Tillman. I think that's a pretty good value. If you have extra receivers, getting ETN is a pretty clean deal. KR, what's good, bro? You said, if Love can't go this week, who would you rather start? Start and sit's coming. I appreciate you, KR, but start and sit comments, questions will be answered later. Tillman and Leggett for Tyrone Tracy. I think it's a little too much. Tracy, obviously, dealing with a concussion right now, but he does have RB2 value. And if you have, like, these guys are just chilling on your bench, that's probably the price tag I would want if I had Tracy. So I don't think it's a bad price. I just think I'd rather have the upside of these receivers. Leggett now that Deontay Johnson's gone, and then Cedric Tillman. Bro, I'm going to do that all the time. Peanut, shout out to Peanut Tillman, because you're going to get some love on this show just because I keep saying the name. But yeah, I'd rather have the 2 receivers, I think, for the upside in PPR leagues. Would you rather keep Baker, Darnold, Stafford rest of the season? Probably Stafford and Baker for the upside, but I don't know if I'd drop Darnold. I'll probably just see this thing through for a little bit. Baker's going to be, Baker went crazy without the main receivers, but I'll probably go Stafford and Baker here. Darnold's just a tough drop. Tillman and Leggett for Evans. Probably rather get Evans, to be honest with you. JT for Aaron Jones. I'd rather have JT. Even with bye, if you need the bye weeks, go ahead. I think I'd rather have JT in a vacuum. I don't really think it's close. Finnegan, what's good? All right, a couple more here. McMillan is the start this week. I'll talk about Jalen McMillan here in a second. He does have more upside, had some opportunity last game, obviously, but didn't capitalize on it. Yes, here you go. Same thing. There's a few receivers where that happened. Bigger, like George Pickens is one of those guys, but you do want to see the production as well. Which 2 QBs would you start? Cody, what's good? Yes, we will do starts and sits. I'll have starts and sits coming in just a minute. What up, Jahan? Answering questions today. Trying not to get to a whole lot of questions. Like I'd rather get to the stuff, but I wanted to get to a few because I know they're in here and typically I don't. So I wanted to get to a couple. 2-6, but best team is 5-3. Okay, so you're not too far out. Traded DK and Pacheco to get B-Rob, Jason Stroud. Moss was my RB2, and you had Anthony Richardson. Sorry about that, man. I don't think this is a bad move. Obviously, you can't wait on Pacheco. DK has a bye next week. You get B-Rob. JSN has a bye next week, too. Stroud has a bye in 14, so maybe you could have done better, but I think this is a good value for you right now. You got a better running back. Wide receiver drop off ain't too heavy. Plus, you got a quarterback that you can start on a week-to-week basis. So I'm not mad at that. Not mad at that. Listen, let me get into these, man. Let me get into these. JN, what's good? Still getting them dubs with you, keeping up the best advice out there. You already know what it is, man. That's why it's the Justin Henry Show. Let me get live on TikTok here, too. You know, I like giving y'all the info, but I got to give TikTok some love, too, man. And I'm telling you, like, getting the stuff ready today was a lot. It took me a lot longer going through the injuries. We have a little bit of weather. Nothing I'm really worried about weather-wise, but there's also a little bit of weather to worry about. We have like 4 or 5 weather games this weekend. Not weather games, rain games this weekend. So it didn't look like anything wind-wise. I didn't see like a whole lot of wind, but we do have 5. I want to say it's 4 or 5 games that are weather games. Rain specifically. All right. You have added products from other brands. What? Remove products from other brands. What the fuck does that mean? TikTok, they changes a whole bunch of shit. Promotional content. This service, or tell viewers that this live promotes a brand, product, or service you could be representing. No, I don't need to do all that, bro. TikTok trying to change the game on the young one. You feel me? TikTok trying to change the game on me. This is giving out advice. This ain't promoting shit. Week 9 fantasy football starts at 6. All right. Last one here. What's good, child? You said Tyreek and K9 for Garrett Wilson and Gibbs. I'd probably just keep this Tyreek and K9 side. It's a pretty clean deal, though. My preference is Tyreek and K9 for the upside because I don't think K9's that far off of Gibbs. The only thing is Gibbs already had his bye. Garrett Wilson looks like the one. Tyreek already had his bye, too, though, so I'd rather have the Tyreek and K9 side slightly. I think it's very close, though. Very close. Shit, I got to turn this sub chat. My bad, y'all. I got to turn the sub chat on. I'm not even going to be answering a whole lot of questions today, so appreciate y'all who got them in, but I ain't even answering the questions today. All right, let me get to these games. First of all, let's go through a quick weather report. Now, this is not a huge weather report, and this isn't anything where, as of right now, I'm not changing the value of any of these players. I just want you guys to know, if you've been with me before, know that I do a weather report as well. It does have a slight impact on ways that you rank players or maybe potential output for the game. For now, just like last week, we saw that Seattle game last week. There was some slick ball, right? Obviously, some passes dropped. When it comes to rain, I'm not overly correcting anything. Even snow, I'm not overly correcting anything. What's the one thing we got to worry about? Wind is the biggest factor, or if it's a heavy downpour of rain, that's completely affecting the game. So as of right now, we have a couple could be rain games, and this is the time where I will start to bring that information to you, whether it's, whether it does affect the game or not. It's just one of those things you want to be conscious of on a week-to-week basis with games heading. If it's the difference between you starting maybe somebody that's in a plus matchup with a 50-point total versus somebody in a rain game that's closer to a 40-point total, okay? It's not the end-all be-all, and I wouldn't panic because I hear rain or even see rain on the field. That should not be a panic move for you. What this should do is if you have, I'm deciding between a flex player and one of them is in a higher shootout game, the other one's in a game where there could be a weather factor, I think maybe I would lean towards the one that had higher output and potentially a higher scoring game. That's how we have it. All right, so we have potential rain in the Cleveland game, the Chargers and Cleveland game. Point total for that one's only 42.5. So obviously you're talking about, a stronger running attack with the Chargers. And then obviously this Jameis-led passing attack was great against Baltimore last week, but might look a little different against the Chargers here. But rain potential in the Chargers and Cleveland Browns game. We have domes for Atlanta and Dallas, domes for Chicago and Arizona, and also dome for Indy and Minnesota. We also have rain potential in Detroit and Green Bay. The reason why I'm not concerned about this, the point total for that game is sitting at 48.5. So typically if it was Detroit, Green Bay, and we knew Jordan Love was going to be the starter, and we knew he was playing, which is, I think the assumption is that he's going to have a chance to get out there this weekend, I think we'd be talking about something more like the 50 to 52 point total for this game. I think the Jordan Love uncertainty, plus maybe a little bit of weather, is the reason why it's dotted down probably 2 or 3 points. We also have potential rain in the Rams in Seattle game, right? Obviously, I say potential rain because none of these games are 100% certainty that there's going to be rain. Rain, the weather forecasts change on a daily basis. This is just information for you guys to have. But Rams at Seattle, obviously, in this point total is 48.5 as well, which seems about right. Doesn't seem like there's going to be a big impact on the game weather-wise. And in the last game, Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Potential rain in that game as well on Monday Night Football. Point total is 46.5. Not overly concerned about it. Like I said, just something to note there, okay? The main one I would say that I have maybe a little bit of concern about is that the Chargers and Cleveland game, because it seems like that would be more of a defensive battle anyway. All right. Moving on to the injury report. Injury report. The Week 9 injury report. Sponsored by Into Your Company here. The Week 9 injury report. All right, so on the Houston side of the ball, Nico Collins is expected to be back next week, Week 10, still coming off of IR for that his hamstring injury. Expected to be able to go back full swing next week, and they're obviously going to need that with Stephon Diggs out with the torn ACL. Dameon Pierce was expected, this is a short week for the Houston Texans, expected to be the backup. He is out with a groin injury himself. He will not be playing this week. All right, so those Dare Ogunbowales, no Cam Akers. Remember, Cam Akers has been traded to the Minnesota Vikings, so it seems like a spot where Dare Ogunbowale could have a little bit more of a role than we expect here for the Houston Texans. For the New York Jets side of the ball, Allen Lazard will be out this week. He is not expected to play on Thursday. Brandon Cooks potentially returning next week. He is out this week, obviously dealing with the knee injury. If you're worried about Rico Dowdle, he was back on the practice field today. He is good to go for this week, expected to be good to go for this week after coming off the illness he had over the weekend. As far as the Cincinnati side of the ball, T. Higgins did not practice today, dealing with that quad injury. So I know last week a lot of people were expecting T. Higgins to be on the field all the way up until the weekend. He is not at practice yet, so we want to make sure that he gets a full practice in before we see him on the field, something to monitor throughout the week. I'm going to probably prepare as if he is able to play, but we need to have options just in case he does not give it a go. For the Chargers, Quentin Johnston got a limited practice today. Obviously, they will need him. Ladd McConkey played well, but they will need Quentin Johnston this week, obviously against this Cleveland Browns secondary. And then for New England, Drake May still dealing with the concussion protocol. He is at stage 3 of the concussion protocol. You have 5 steps to get through in order to be able to play. So he is progressing through that. He's a younger player. Sometimes that matters. Obviously, we saw with Malik Neighbors, that wasn't the case. It took a little bit more time. So we want to make sure he can get through concussion protocol. If he's not able to give it a go, I'm assuming Jacoby Brissett will be out there starting. But for now, it looks like Drake May is going through the concussion protocol, has a chance to suit up this weekend. As far as the Tennessee Titans go, Tyjae Spears back on the practice field, got in a limited practice today. Will Levis back on the practice field, full practice. And then Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, and Tyler Boyd all did not practice. Not sure if that's just a Veterans Day arrest, which it kind of seems like given the names. But just something to note here, if something does come up with Ridley, Pollard, and Boyd, if they're not able to give it a go. Obviously, Tyjae Spears coming back. This is a player a lot of people were excited about during this offseason. The coaching staff had talked about getting that more to a 50-50 work split. Not saying that I think that happens this week, but if Pollard is banged up, just know that Tyjae Spears might be a player you don't want to leave on free agents if he's out there for whatever reason. As far as Jaden Daniels, obviously we saw him play with the rib injury, so no concern there if you were worried about him. Obviously he was able to give it a go. For the New York Giants, Tyrone Tracy still dealing with the concussion. He has to get through concussion protocol this week in order to be on the field, obviously. If not, we're going to be talking about Devin Singletary as an option here. So let's see if we can get Tyrone Tracy back on the field for that game against the Commanders. For New Orleans, we have been without Derek Carr for the last couple weeks, dealing with an oblique injury. He is expected to be back on the field this week. Obviously, it was good to see Taysom Hill get back on the field last week. Want to make sure he's able to get through a full week of practice and be back on the field again this week. And then Kendre Miller did not practice today. I don't know what the injury was, but he is going to be questionable for this week, heading into this week. Andy Dalton expected to be the backup this week. Bryce Young getting another start. He was back at practice today. So obviously he was dealing with the thumb injury. It's good to see him back in a full practice capacity, but he's going to be the backup. I don't even know if he's going to play, but I know he'll be the backup at least. Bryce Young is expected to start this week. Jonathan Brooks got in a full practice today, so he is nearing the end of his 21-day practice window. My assumption is that he will be on the field this week. Adam Thielen is in the second week of his 21-day practice window. He also got a limited practice. It's determined still to see if he is going to be available for this week. My gut is that the trade deadline's coming up. I think it's coming up this next week, week 10. The trade deadline's coming up, so they're going to want to see him on the field in case he's going to be moved this week as well, as the Carolina Panthers look like they're probably going to be playing for that number 1 draft pick next year. For the Baltimore Ravens, Keaton Mitchell obviously coming off of his injury last season. His 21-day practice window was open, and he got in a full practice today, so he could be coming back either this week or next week. For Jacksonville, obviously, Brian Thomas is the name to look out for. He's dealing with a rib injury, got a limited practice in. There's been comments about him being day-to-day, also week-to-week. Looks like it's more of the day-to-day type thing, has an outside chance of playing this weekend. Christian Kirk officially out for the year. Obviously, you've already made adjustments to that and dropped him. If you haven't, it is time to drop him. He will not be on the field the rest of the season. And then Travis Etienne was back on the practice field, getting in a limited practice today. He has been week to week. I think the expectation is that he has a good chance of being out there on the field this week. Dallas Goedert did not practice today yet again, so he's been trying to work his way back from the hamstring injury he suffered. I want to say it was week 6 he suffered that hamstring injury. Still trying to work his way back. You'd want to see him get into limited practice tomorrow, full practice on Friday, before being able to give it a go this week against Jacksonville. DJ Moore dealing with the hand injury that we saw towards the end of the game against the Commanders. Expectation is that he should be able to give it a go. He'll be questionable dealing with that hand injury. Obviously, Jameson Williams still out this week due to the suspension and whatever else stuff Jameson Williams got going on with the police and the gun and stuff. Hopefully, he's able to get through that and be back on the field for our fantasy teams next week. Jordan Love obviously dealing with the groin injury. We got to make sure he's available for this week. Very questionable for this week. Malik Willis would be the start if he's not able to give it a go. Josh Jacobs did not practice today. Questionable for the week. He said that he's going to be out there on Sunday. So we've heard that before from players, and then they don't play. So I think Josh Jacobs will be out there just based on what he was saying. Jordan Whittington got into limited practice today. He is questionable for the week, obviously, with Cooper Kupp back and Puka Nacua back. He's not an option we're going to be talking about. Just want to put that out there for my deeper leagues. DK Metcalf still week to week. we got to make sure he's able to be out there this week. The expectation is that he's going to be on the field. According to the Seahawks, they said that they're expecting him to have a chance at playing this weekend. TJ Hawkinson did not play last week. His 21-day practice window is over. He's already with the team. Expected to be out there this week. Will probably be limited some sort, so don't expect top 5 TJ Hawkinson. Expect more back-end tight end 1, high-end tight end 2. We got to see what the workload looks like for him in the Sunday night football game against the Colts. Obviously, we don't talk about injury, but Joe Flacco will be starting for the Colts. Obviously, Anthony Richardson is bench. You guys probably know that if you've been watching the content at all. Unfortunately for A-Rich, he's got to wait a while. As far as Tampa goes, Sterling Shepard is another receiver. He is questionable for this week, dealing with a hamstring injury. Obviously, Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan are the ones who we want to see on the field anyway. Sterling Shepard, kind of a third piece in this puzzle, maybe even fourth if you want to call that, behind Cade Otton. But he is questionable for this week with Mike Evans on the shelf until week 12 and Chris Godwin out for the year. And then as far as KC goes, obviously Juju Smith-Schuster still working his way back from the hamstring injury. If you have Isaiah Pacheco, there's been word that he might be available starting week 10 or week 11 coming up here very soon. So if you can, Isaiah Pacheco is probably going to be in some kind of timeshare with Kareem Hunt. Just know that. I don't think this is going to be a huge workload either way once he returns. Probably some kind of split here, which obviously none of us want to see for fantasy purposes. But if you're looking at getting Isaiah Pacheco, don't treat him as the high-end RB2 that he was, back-end RB1 that he was. Treat him, obviously adjust for that value because Kareem Hunt looks to have earned at least some kind of workload here in the near future. All right? The Week 9 injury report is in the books. Let's get started with the games. Houston at New York. New York is 2-point favorites here against this Texans team. And obviously with the Texans missing a bunch of their starting receivers, the floor is a lot lower for CJ Stroud than it typically is, who hasn't even had a 20-point game this year yet. So CJ Stroud to me is going to be a QB2. And his Jets team has been a top 5 team across the board pretty much. They've been top 10 against every single position when it comes to fantasy. So I think CJ Stroud fits in as a QB2 for me this week. And obviously the Jets have been doing a really good job eliminating pass. They've had a couple blow-up games. Some of these teams have been able to score against them, but for the most part, they've kept things in containment. So CJ Stroud, a QB2 for me this week, especially without his leading weapons. As far as Tank Dell, he's going to have a tough matchup on the other side versus Sauce Gardner. Still fits in as a wide receiver 3 for me. I would expect somebody else in this passing game to potentially step up, and it'll probably be spread out and very tough to pinpoint which one is going to be the player that steps up. Xavier Hutchinson, John Mechie, those are the two that obviously you guys have picked up and probably depend on. Hutchinson probably play a little bit more at the outside. Mechie offers a little bit more love in the slot. And he's a player that this team, invested a second-round pick in a couple years ago, was not able to play due to cancer, has now worked his way back. And I mentioned this on another show. They did cut Noah Brown. They did not cut John Mechie. So just know that he might have an opportunity here. If I had to bet, I think Mechie is more of the floor play. Xavier Hutchinson is more of the upside play here. And then don't forget about Robert Woods in your 16-team leagues if you're looking for, those super deep leagues, you're looking for any kind of love or maybe some dynasty love there. Robert Woods only saw about 30% of the snaps last week. Did have a couple catches, but that's a much deeper name to note. He's going to be on the field. He'll be on the field in some form or fashion. And then Dalton Schultz offers a little bit of upside here as a back-end tight end 1. I don't see a really big ceiling for him, but he does offer a little bit of upside as probably the second or third option in the passing game for the Texans this week. As far as Joe Mixon goes, he's going to see all the work he can handle. I know there were some concerns about him coming off of the ankle a couple weeks ago. He looks to be all the way back. I would assume a heavy volume game, anywhere from 10 to 25 touches, especially with Dameon Pierce out. I would think Joe Mixon is probably going to be an elite top 5 running back for this week as well. So go ahead and fire him up. Even though the matchup is tough, fire up Joe Mixon. Just know he's been kind of matchup proof. He's volume based right now. At floor, he is a volume based RB1. And if he gets in the end zone, it's just up from there because he gets involved in the passing game as well. So Mixon an elite play this week. As far as the Jets go, Aaron Rodgers due for better days. This Houston defense, for as tough it is in real football fantasy purpose-wise, they've been a bottom 10 team against the quarterback position. So feel good about Aaron Rodgers. And the schedule lightens up for Rodgers too. I know a lot of people are probably watching the mainstream media when it comes to like, oh man, they're 2-6. Are they going to be able to make the playoffs? But it takes a little bit of time to get chemistry going. I don't know that it's against this Houston Texans defense, which is pretty good, but I think he'll have a decent day throwing the football and should be a QB2 for this week. And like I said, the schedule lightens up for the Jets passing game. So just know that as the season goes on, Aaron Rodgers might even be a good buy low candidate right now. As far as receivers go, decent matchup on paper. Teams tend to need to throw against the Houston Texans. So I think Garrett Wilson and Adams, the big question about this when Adams got traded from the Raiders was like, where do they fit in? Where do they fit in? Like, are they both wide receiver twos? Is Adams the one? Is Garrett Wilson the one? And right now, Garrett Wilson's just seeing the better targets. Garrett Wilson is the one on this team. So I would put him as a low-end wide receiver 1 moving forward right now. And Davante Adams would be more of a low-end wide receiver 2 until we see something change in this dynamic. Aaron Rodgers, if he's looking deep, it's towards Garrett Wilson. He's getting the better, the A-dot stuff that's going his way. And then Davante Adams is a little bit more of the safety blanket right now, the comfort zone, I would say, for Rodgers. It could easily switch up in this game. I could see a path where we find Davante Adams getting a little bit more downfield action, just getting more volume in general. But for now, this feels like Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, just at a lesser skill. That's what it feels like. It feels like Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs early in the year, where Nico's the guy, Garrett Wilson, and Davante Adams is the veteran that kind of just fits in, finds some touchdowns, still has good volume, but not seeing the stuff downfield that you want to see out of your elite wide receiver ones. As far as the running backs go, and then obviously Allen Lazard being out means more volume for those two as well. As far as Allen Lazard, as far as Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, we saw Braylon Allen play a lot more last week, and that could have been due to the short week. So sometimes we may notice workload fluctuations on Sundays. And you also got to remember that teams play on Thursday night as well. And so when you have two good running backs, there's no need to beat one into the ground. And I think that's what these teams did. So Braylon Allen, Breece Hall may split again here on short rest. But for the most part, obviously, Breece Hall is still going to fit in as an RB1 type play. And Braylon Allen is going to be more of an upside flex with a little bit more floor than you want to see. As far as Tyler Conklin goes, Texans have been the best team against tight ends, for better or for worse, whatever that means. If they haven't played the right matchups yet, tight end hasn't been a very high scoring position outside of last week on National Tight Ends Day. Tyler Conklin is a tight end 2 at best this week. All right, let's move on. A very thorough Thursday night evaluation. I went a little longer on the Jets than I thought I would. Dallas and Atlanta. This is the highest scoring game of the week, so it should be shootout potential here. Atlanta Falcons 2.5-point favorites against Dallas. And this game kind of feels like Dallas got to get a win, man. They obviously against my Niners, they were not able to handle business, but this is a plus matchup on paper for both quarterbacks. For Dak, I'd say this. It's a plus matchup on paper, but the Falcons only give up 215 yards a game to quarterbacks. So some of the stuff has been on the ground. Like they're averaging 25 to 30 yards. I don't know the exact numbers, like 25 to 30 yards rushing. When quarterbacks go against them, they get it 25 to 30 yards rushing. So just know that even though it's a plus matchup on paper, this Atlanta defense has been better than advertised. And I know I think they're missing a piece on defense, but still obviously Dak is a high-end QB2, back-end QB1 for me this week. As far as receivers go, we know this is the CeeDee Lamb show. It's good to see him in back-to-back weeks, not including the bye, obviously. 14 targets and 17 targets. So for the most part, CeeDee Lamb that we saw after the bye last season, it looks like that's starting to take place. So if you had somebody that's sending you lowball offers for CeeDee Lamb, make sure you know he's obviously after the game last week, you're not selling him, but just know he's all the way back. It seems like these two are back in connection. Jalen Tolbert also has a little bit of flex appeal here in your deeper 14, 16 team leagues. So make sure if somebody dropped him in those deeper leagues, Jalen Tolbert, who has played decent at times in his secondary role, could have a decent game here against this Atlanta secondary. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb's the guy, but just another option here if you're looking in your much deeper leagues, your 16 team leagues. And then as far as the running backs, Dalvin Cook was a popular pickup last week after it was announced that he was elevated. He has been since demoted back to the practice squad. So you can let go of Dalvin Cook. Rico Dowdle has no injury designation heading into the week. He's still a flex at best as this Dallas running game has been putrid all season long. As far as Atlanta goes, obviously with this game having shootout potential, Kirk Cousins enters the high-end QB2, back-end QB1 conversation. He's found a way to get this ball out to his players, whether it's been to the tight ends, to the receivers. So he looks much more comfortable than he did at the beginning of the year. And to me, Kirk in this offense right now with the way that they're playing in matchups like this has QB1 appeal. So I would start him in single QB leagues. And I think he's more of a back-end QB1. Like him and Dak are probably going to be ranked right next to each other in my rankings. As far as receivers go, Drake London, continue to start him as an elite wide receiver option. Dallas is getting some pieces back on defense, but to me, this is still a matchup that you want to exploit. They've been pretty good against receivers, but I'm starting Drake as a wide receiver 1, Darnell Mooney as a high upside flex play. As far as running back goes, Bijan is in a very plus matchup. This Dallas defense, since they've had a couple losses on the defensive line, has been carved up by running backs. So obviously Bijan deserves some love here, and in this game, I don't think anybody's benching him. Tyler Algier even has a little bit of flex appeal here in your deeper leagues. And then as far as the tight ends go, I didn't talk about Jake Ferguson. He's just a low ceiling tight end 1 for me, back end tight end 1. And we saw last week with Kyle Pitts, he has been he has mega upside, obviously 2 touchdowns last week, but he has the upside on a week-to-week basis. It's just the floor is what we don't want to see out of Kyle Pitts. So just know, even in this matchup, it's a middling matchup for both tight ends, but it's a tale of 2 different tight ends. You got Jake Ferguson is kind of the floor play, and then we got Kyle Pitts is the upside play here. So both of them in similar low end tight end 1 rankings for me this week. As far as Miami Buffalo goes, Miami Buffalo. This is the game we saw Tua go down last time. So obviously for Miami, Tua the one thing that we remember from that game is that he got the concussion. The one thing it's easy to forget about that game is he also was throwing picks left and right against that defense. So this is a game where Tua struggled. And I still think this offense is going to be better and their backs are against the wall right now. But I view Tua as more of a high-end QB2 in this matchup against Buffalo. So be careful with Tua, not because of injury, but just because this Buffalo team has been good against quarterbacks. So for me, I think Tua, I would love to put him just like potential-wise, shootout-wise, 50-point total here on the board. Would love to put Tua in this, tight end or quarterback 1 ranking. I just can't do it. He's a high-end QB2 for me this week. As far as receivers go, Tyreek Hill is obviously still a wide receiver 1. We want to see some more of those, Tyreek Hill games, the 150 and 2 touchdown type games. I don't know that it comes this week against Rasul Douglas in this Buffalo secondary, but you still start him as a wide receiver 1. And then obviously Jalen Waddle is on the wide receiver 3 plus radar for me this week as well. And then as far as Devon Achane, he flexed, some of that RB1 type potential that we've been wanting to see. With him and Tua on the field, he has been producing at a really high level. So feel free to play him, obviously, as a ceiling play, as an RB1. But Raheem Mostert also offers a little bit of flex appeal this week, as Buffalo's been a bottom 2 team against the running back position. So obviously, Mostert is a player who got the score last week. But Devon Achane has 20, 25-point potential any given week. And last time these 2 teams played, he went over a 20-point total. All right, and then as far as the Buffalo side goes, last time we saw James Cook really go off when these 2 teams played, but this passing attack looks a lot different. Josh Allen going up against Miami, who's been the top team against quarterbacks. I've talked about that multiple times here on the stream. But Josh Allen in a tough matchup is still a top 5 option for me this week. Stealing is a little bit capped, but these receivers do offer a little bit more upside for Josh Allen specifically, okay? And as far as the receivers go, obviously, when it comes to Amari Cooper, that I know a lot of people might be panicking on his value. He had the touchdown and then he didn't do nothing last week. Had a limited practice today. Just know I think better days are ahead for Amari Cooper, who probably is going to see a lot of Jalen Ramsey this week. But better days are ahead. It's just we're probably going to get more inconsistency then even I thought once the deal was done, I thought we would see a little bit more for Amari Cooper. I think this was, we talk about real life versus fantasy moves. This was much more a real life move than fantasy move, as Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir both proved they're going to be involved. And for our fantasy teams, it's a tough pill to swallow. I think Amari Cooper, he's often viewed as like, wide receiver 2 type play. And I think he'll have some weeks where he reminds us why the team traded for him. It's just they also invested in Keon Coleman. You also have a guy in Khalil Shakir who has played the role pretty well throughout this entire season. So unfortunately, I think we do get a little bit of the uncertainty with all 3 of these receivers. We're going to see weeks where Keon Coleman looks the part of wide receiver 1. We will see weeks where, like last week, Khalil Shakir plays really well. And then we're also going to see weeks where Amari Cooper plays much better than he did last week. So just know it might be a mixed bag from these Buffalo receivers week in and week out. Miami's been tough against receivers overall in general. As far as James Cook, last time these 2 teams played, like I said, 3 touchdowns. I'm not expecting that this week. Also, we saw Ray Davis get a little bit of work that game. James Cook is on the high-end RB2, back-end RB1 radar for me this week. And then the tight ends, obviously Kincaid has not been what we expect this week. He's still a back-end tight end 1 for me this week, especially with the point total being what it is. Moving on. Raiders and Bengals. 7-point total here, 46.5 points on the board. So it seems like a middling game. Game script kind of favors like Cincinnati getting out to a lead and, the Raiders working their way back if they are able to work their way back. That's kind of what this feels like. I just don't trust a whole lot of the Raider options here. Minshew's been average at best. So even in your Superflex leagues, you might have a 15-point player on your team. I don't know that Minshew's a 15-point player at this point. He's probably somewhere closer to 10 to 14 range. I think you might even have a better piece in PPR leagues that you could start over Minshew in Superflex. I would really want to avoid all the Raiders in general. Like Alexander Mattison is still the starting running back for this team, according to it. But I have a feeling we might even see some more Zamir White or Dylan Labe might even get involved here soon. I just think that there's really not a whole lot on this Raiders team that I want to start unless their names are Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. Trey Tucker showed a little bit of juice earlier this year. He's been up and down. It's just, to me, those are the only 2 players I'd want to start. Myers is a flex, for limited upside. He need a touchdown or he need 5+ catches like he did last week. And then Brock Bowers, obviously, has been elite all season long. So, and Bowers does have a plus matchup this week. Cincinnati's been a bottom 10 team against the tight end position. So, obviously, Bowers is going to be a top 3 tight end for me this week. Jacoby Myers on the flex radar. That's about as best as I'm going to give to him. As far as Cincinnati goes, the game script could be a thing here for them. So Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, obviously fire them up. But this could work into like a Chase Brown type game, who Chase Brown has seemed to take over this workload. Like once Zach Moss got banged up, it felt like at the beginning of the year, Zach Moss was the red zone guy, the workhorse. And then we saw Chase Brown as the change of pace back. And things have changed now. And Chase Brown is seeing more work, more time on the field, and he's more effective with his touches. So the game script kind of seems like we might get some Chase Brown, maybe a little Zach Moss love later on, but I expect RB2 production this week out of Chase Brown. As far as T. Higgins, he is questionable for this game. So obviously, we got to see him get back on the field. And hopefully he's able to get a practice in this week. That would be the only way I would start. Not the only way I would start T. Higgins, but the way I'd feel comfortable starting T. Higgins this week over some of your more reliable options. And then just note, if T. Higgins is out, we did see an improved role for Mike Gesicki, who it looked like Eric All had started to take over a lot of the workload for Mike Gesicki. And Mike Gesicki had 7 catches on 73 yards last week. So just know, if T. Higgins is out, that's a matchup that could be exploited. So Gesicki, obviously, we've seen him show his receiving chops over the years. A player that, if you're desperate at tight end this week for whatever reason, if you have George Kittle, maybe you have Pat Freiermuth, and, there's not a whole lot of options in your 14, 16 team leagues, go ahead. Gesicki is a decent start. All right, moving on. Let me get through 2 more, and then I'll try to get to a couple questions here. Okay? Couple questions. After I get to, let me get through 2 more games. Chargers in Cleveland. Like I said, potential rain in this one. I don't know that it'll affect a whole lot for either of these two teams. The Chargers more specifically focus on the run game anyway. And Justin Herbert, who obviously threw the shit out of the ball last week, had a game. Obviously, they're reminded us who Justin Herbert is at times. So I don't think it's something you can rely on a week-to-week basis, unfortunately, when it comes to Herbert. But he's looked healthier over the last couple weeks, and he's looked a little bit more willing to throw the ball downfield like we saw in previous years. So Justin Herbert is on the back end QB2 radar and inching his way up, I would say. If he's able to produce and teams are starting to focus in a little bit more on the running attack and Herbert is a little bit healthier, then maybe we can start to tear him up. But for now, he's still going to be a QB2 until we see a little bit more consistency out of him. As far as the receivers, I think Ladd McConkey has earned flex after last week's production especially, has earned the right to be a flex option this week, a very safe flex option. I think he offers good floor here, especially if Quentin Johnston can't go up this week. Quentin Johnston has a potential to return this week, was a limited participant in practice. And Cleveland has been a favorable match, surprisingly. Cleveland's been a favorable matchup for receivers. So, like I said, the low point total here indicates that maybe we shouldn't expect so much, but the matchup screams there's potential here. As far as J.K. Dobbins goes, he continues to be a low end. It kind of seems like some of that steam's wearing off. You got J.K. Dobbins early in the year. He was going for long scores and scoring touchdowns at a consistent rate. It seems like the steam's kind of wearing off of that. So just know, Kamani Vidal is a player that a lot of people are going to drop right now. I don't know how much juice he would have as a starter, or if, Gus Edwards comes back at some point this year. I know he's on IR right now. Just know, I don't know how much longer J.K. Dobbins has as this full volume type play. It kind of seems like he might be wearing down a little bit. Hopefully he proves us wrong, is able to be good for our fantasy teams, but that's kind of the vibe that I get right now, is that at some point here in the next 2-3 weeks, it wouldn't, in the Chargers, they've already had their bye. It wouldn't surprise me to see J.K. Dobbins kind of lose grip on that starting role. So that's just my personal thought on it. Just seeing the workload and kind of the efficiency drop a little bit over the last few weeks. Dobbins, to me, I think there's a world where we can see Dobbins lose some work. As far as the Cleveland side of the ball, a lot of question marks here about what this will look like against a very tough Chargers defense. This defense has been elite just in general, but Jameis Winston obviously not going up against the team that allows – Baltimore last week is the team that allowed the most passing yards in the league, right? They allow most passing yards per game in the league. That's not the case here with this Chargers defense. So I think they'll throw some different looks at Jameis, and obviously he was a great quarterback last week. He's a QB2 for me this week. As far as the receivers go, this team has been elite against wide receivers. So be very careful with your Cedric Tillmans. Obviously, you got to start him. I think he's still worth a wide receiver 3 start. But just be careful with expecting the consistency that we've seen over the last 2 weeks with Cedric Tillman. It might be dialed back a little bit. So your Elijah Moore, your Jerry Jeudy, just some of those quicker targets might be a little bit more productive this week. All 3 are flex plays for me out there, not anything more than flexes. Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, and then Elijah Moore as well, who all 3 played well last week. As far as Nick Chubb, he has become, I think we're assuming Nick Chubb is a guy that can handle 20 to 25 touches and 125 yards on the ground. He's just not going to be the same player as he was in the past coming off of that injury. So right now he's more of a touchdown or bust player. I think Jerome Ford has an outside chance of being available for this week as well. So Nick Chubb, if you have him, treat him as a touchdown-dependent RB2. I think it's a cool name to start. You have Nick Chubb in your lineup alongside Saquon Barkley, or Nick Chubb alongside, your stronger option. But just know he is more of a touchdown or bust play at this point, probably somewhere in the 6 to 9 point marker if he does not score a touchdown. And then obviously David Njoku, top 3 play, must start tight end right now. I would start him in tight end premium leagues at the flex. He is essentially the wide receiver 1 on this team right now. Moving on. And after this New England-Tennessee game, I'll get to questions. Appreciate y'all for liking the stream, showing love to the stream. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all. New England, Tennessee won't be a fun game to talk about, but we got to talk about it. Obviously, a lot depends on the health of Drake May. Drake May dealing with concussion protocol. He has to clear concussion protocol. So I talked about that. He is in stage 3 of that, according to the reports out there. My good friend, Dr. Jesse Morse, the fantasy or injury experts is what he goes by now, is on Twitter. You guys make sure to give him a follow. There's a lot of really good doctors in this space. I got to remember all of their names, but there's about 3 that I check out on a regular basis. Even a guy here on TikTok that's newer. I don't know his name, but he talks about injuries a lot. Next time we're on the stream, I'll show all 3 of them some love. Deepak, I want to say his name's Deepak on Twitter. Deepak, I can't remember his name right now. I'll show love to them on the next episode. But the injury experts is where you can go on Twitter to find some injury updates as well. And then just so you guys know too, I use like Underdog NFL on Twitter. They have a lot of the practice updates. That's where I do get some of the information for practice updates, if you guys are looking for additional sources of information. No gatekeeping. Hey, ain't no gatekeeping on this side. Ain't no gatekeeping. But as far as Drake May, obviously he needs to go through concussion protocol and pass concussion protocol in order to play this week. Otherwise, it would be Jacoby Brissett. Tennessee has been, sometimes they've been a tough defense, but we've seen them get exploited here as of late. So obviously when it comes to like this passing attack, you want to see Drake May in there for any of the Patriots receivers that you're considering starting. I ain't really trying to start any of them, but Drake May himself, if he's able to give it a go, was on pace to have another strong game, and then he got hurt. So I think Drake May, when it comes to him, like start him as a high-end quarterback too. If he does give it a go, if he's not able to give it a go, I pretty much fade everybody on this New England roster. Ramondre Stevenson would be a flex at best. Obviously, you're not starting anybody else on this team, preferably. Hunter Henry at best is a tight end too. Like there's just not a whole lot of starting options on this Patriots team consistency-wise if May is not able to give it a go. If he is able to give it a go, I think Stevenson is still a higher end flex, more of an RB3 than he is a flex. And then I think that the receiver game, I would start Demario Douglas. I wouldn't really trust anybody else in this passing attack. Kayshon Boutte has been seeing a lot more time on the field than anybody else, but I wouldn't fully trust any of these Patriots receivers. As far as Tennessee goes, it's a very tough game for me to even give fantasy advice on because we don't even know who's going to be on the damn field. Will Levis is practicing right now. I don't know if he's going to be the starter this week. Mason Rudolph played decent last week, got his receivers some looks, but didn't get the win and obviously made some mistakes. Who knows who's going to be the starting quarterback? Either way, for Superflex, we're not starting either of them, but it does have an impact like on the way that this offense moves. We've seen it's been a little harder to move the football with Will Levis. Mason Rudolph was actually able to push things downfield. So when it comes to Calvin Ridley, we got to make sure he's healthy and available for this game. He has been missing practice throughout the season. He missed practice today, but I don't know if he's going to be available for this game. I'm assuming he is. Haven't seen anything that said he will not be available. He does have wide receiver 3 plus appeal if Mason Rudolph starts. If Will Levis starts, I would still consider him a wide receiver 3, just a little bit more of the negative, like a lot lower floor if Levis starts. So I think Calvin Ridley is still startable. And the reason I think this is because with D-Hop out of town, their only goal now is to like find a way to get Calvin Ridley and whichever quarterback it is some chemistry. They've invested money in Calvin Ridley being their guy for the next 5 years, at least the next 2-3. I don't know what the back end of that contract looks like, but typically for the next 2-3 years, we're going to see, they have to find out, is Calvin Ridley the guy? So I would expect the targets to continue to come his way throughout the year. Or throughout this game. Yeah, throughout the year as well. Tyler Boyd also missed practice, but obviously I thought starting him last week would have been a good move as a wide receiver too. But the receiver that's really stepped up here over the last 3 weeks has been Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. And he's had 3 touchdowns. He's had a touchdown in every single week over the last 3 weeks. So a little value play there in the 16-team leagues if you're looking for potentially a guy that these Tennessee quarterbacks are looking to get the football to, especially if Mason Rudolph is a starter. Like Nick Westbrook-Ikhine does have some potential here in your much deeper leagues if you're looking for options. And as far as the running backs go, this has been a plus matchup on paper for the running backs here. The Patriots have been a favorable matchup for running backs, top 3 team for running backs. So Pollard is a must start in this game, but he missed practice today. So I don't know if Pollard is going to be back on the field tomorrow. If he is on the practice field, obviously fire him up as a back end RB1, high end RB2 for the matchup. If he is not available, if Tony Pollard cannot play this week, Tyjae Spears was back at practice today, and I'm assuming that the return is coming this weekend. So Tyjae Spears could be a play that we're looking at as like a flex play. And I think, we haven't really seen, this is kind of one of them gut things. We talked about them intuition things. We haven't really seen Tony Pollard be banged up at all this year. And we've seen, the coaching staff really talk about getting Tyjae Spears more involved. So I'm not wishing nothing on Tony Pollard, and I hope he has a clean season of health. But typically running backs do get nicked up, banged up at some point throughout the year. Wouldn't be surprising to see Tyjae Spears get a chance at redemption at some point here in the near future. Not banking on that this week. That's just something I'm intuition-wise letting you guys know what's at the top of my brain. Tony Pollard, a must-start this week. Tyjae Spears, a flex at best if you need to start him. I think he belongs on benches. All right, that does it for New England and Tennessee. Let me get the questions. Whoa, shit, front of the line pass. Low Kane. Appreciate you, my boy. Appreciate you, dog. Man, you showing major love, huh? Low Kane. My dude. I have Kyler and Flacco for my QBs. Who would you start this week? I also have Andrews and Kelce and Kraft as my tight end. Lamb, A.J. Brown, and Downs as my receivers this week, with Connor and Chase Brown as my running backs. Would you trade Andrews for ETN? All right, multi-layer question. I'm getting to all of this. So you have Kyler and Flacco as the quarterbacks. Obviously, Joe Flacco up against Minnesota. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then we got Kyler Murray going up against a tough Chicago defense. So I know you're probably debating, like, do you start the matchup or do you go with the player? And I kind of feel like Kyler is the play here, even against a tough Chicago team. I probably would just lean Kyler for the floor. The only thing is, that Minnesota team, man, is Flacco has been slinging the rock when he's played. So I think Flacco does have some upside, but to me, his upside is like around Kyler's floor. And like if Kyler goes for a long run, like he did a couple weeks ago when he had a tough matchup, if Kyler goes for a long run or a score, it's like that automatically now is probably going to do more than what Flacco can do on most days, unless Flacco goes for 303 TDs. So I know Minnesota has been a decent matchup overall for quarterbacks, even with the blitzing defense, but I would still go Kyler here for your quarterback. And then Andrews, Kelce, Kraft question. Obviously, you can afford to get rid of a tight end. And you have Connor and Chase Brown as your running backs. So I do think with Kraft and Kelce, you're already set at tight end. Kelce's already had his bye. I'd feel good about starting Kelce every single week. And if Kelce were to go down, I do think Tucker Kraft is a good enough tight end to start. So I don't mind the trade Mark Andrews for ETN because I think you're getting a little bit of upside, but it's like you might be able to get more for Andrews than ETN. That's where I'm at. I just think that it's probably going to be a split at best for ETN. So I would like to get more out of Andrews, just the name value, but I think this is a pretty clean deal in my opinion. Locaine, appreciate you, homie. Hopefully that was dialed in enough for you, man. Thank you for showing love. All right, Boston cover 6.5 against Indy tonight. They should. I don't know. Indy plays them tough sometimes though, but I think cover against Indy. That's a 6.5, man. That's right around that free throw territory. A close game, late free throws. That seems like a 6-7 point game already. So I think they're good enough to beat Indy by that, but that's not something I would just play money line there. Play Boston money line. Just get your guaranteed dub. That money line can't be too far off. What is that? Probably what? Minus 160, minus 150? It can't be. I would just play the money line. Just get your dub if you feel good about the game. Lysander. Did I say that right? Lysander? Should I trade away Brian Robinson for James Conner? I would rather have James Conner in a vacuum, but there's a world where Arizona starts to lose and Trey Benson gets a little bit more love towards the end of the season. Whereas Brian Robinson, the Commanders are on playoff track right now. So Brian Robinson's going to kind of be the same player. So I think during the fantasy playoffs is where I would have a little bit of skepticism about this. But I think for now, in a vacuum, I'd rather have James Conner over Brian Robinson. Similar type production for me. This would be looking at like the other outlying factors. I think Washington and the Cardinals have a bye the same week. I'd be looking at matchups. So I haven't done the homework for that right now off the top of my head for those two players specifically, but that's how I take a look at it. And in full flex PPR, Ridley, Chuba, or Pittman this week. Ridley, Chuba, Pittman. I think we might see Jonathan Brooks back this week, which would give me a little bit more pause for concern when it comes to Chuba. Obviously, with Flacco back, it's good news for Pittman. I would probably start Pittman if Will Levis was the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. But for now, if Mason Rudolph's able to give it a go, I would go Ridley. So that's my answer. If Levis starts, go Pittman. If Mason Rudolph starts, go Ridley. All right? That's how I got it. All right, let me get back into the games, man. Otherwise, this will be a forever show. How many games am I through right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm only through 6 games. Damn. All right. Washington, New York. Washington, New York. Obviously, off of a crazy finish last week. Man, Jayden Daniels is him. He is a tough top 3 play any given week. Obviously, you're starting him no matter what. Like last week proved, even down to the wire. You got to start Jayden Daniels, no matter the matchup. So, and this is a plus matchup for him. I know Chicago was a little tougher. This is a good matchup for him. Fire up the usuals when it comes to this Washington Commanders team. Talking about, Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, even Zach Ertz has been pretty much double digit on a weekly basis here for the Commanders. So feel good about your usual options here in the Commanders passing game and run game. All right, Brian Robinson as a weekly running back too. And this Giants defense has been good and bad at times. So we've seen like the good out of them. We've seen the bad, like, against the Steelers last week, they struggled pretty heavily to stop pretty much everything. So I think against this Washington line is a little funky here, 43.5 points. But I say all the usual suspects, fire them up, normal capacity. I don't really see a whole lot of outliers here. Maybe if you want to start Eckler as a desperation flex play. But for now, most of the usual suspects here when it comes to the Washington Commanders. And then as far as the Giants go, now Daniel Jones, struggling in real fantasy, has been pretty mediocre. And I think he's a super flex start only. Like if you were hoping to get some of the earlier Daniel Jones that we saw in the season, I think that might have been, I was thinking like, damn, maybe I underrated Daniel Jones, but we've seen some of the bad Daniel Jones, and there's reasons why this Giants team's getting questions about him being the starter moving forward. So if you have Daniel Jones as super flex, if he has a good week, this might be the week to get rid of him after this matchup. Washington has gone from a plus matchup for quarterbacks, receivers, everybody, to now a negative matchup for quarterbacks specifically. And even receivers have come way down since the start of the season when they were the #1 team to go against. Like Dan Quinn has really turned this thing around. So when you see Washington Commanders, don't automatically think this is the same team as earlier in the year. This is a much different team. For quarterbacks and wide receivers, just this passing game in general, they are better than advertised. All right. But as far as Malik Neighbors, fire him up obviously as a wide receiver too. We've seen some strong games out of Darius Slayton lately. So just a name to watch. They could be just featuring him right now, potential trade candidate as we head into next week. But for now, I think we got to treat him as a flex, the same way we were treating Wan'Dale Robinson as a flex. Looks like these two are kind of just interchangeable boom or bust type flex plays that Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson. And then as far as the running backs go, Tyrone Tracy dealing with the concussion he suffered late in the Commanders game. We saw him walk off the field, was not able to get back. He missed practice today, has to go through concussion protocol in order to be on the field. If he does play, it looks like he's fully taken over as the RB for this team. He's the RB1 on this team. So for now, if he's able to give it a go, I would treat him as a running back 2 for the week. If he's not able to give it a go, Devin Singletary would step up and be a low-end RB2 for me this week against the Commanders. I think Singletary played well, decent, I would say, early on. Doesn't have the true upside of what a Tyrone Tracy does, and I think that's the difference in these two, is that Tracy offers RB1 upside on a weekly basis, especially going up against this Washington team where they're probably going to use him in the passing game a little bit as well. But Singletary does offer a very similar type floor, just not the same ceiling. And then shout out to those who got in with the Theo Johnson with me last week on the player props. That did well. And then let's move on. We're moving on. Moving on, like Maya said. All right. New Orleans and Carolina. We saw this game earlier in the year, and we saw a game where Derek Carr went nuts. And we saw this the game where Bryce Young essentially showed he was not ready for the big lights, right? Now we get the return of both of these guys. We get Bryce Young starting yet again. Obviously started last week, starting again. But we get Derek Carr back this week. So if you had Spencer Rattler, and obviously the team was already ready to bench him. They benched him last week. You can get rid of Spencer Rattler as well if you had him in Superflex. Derek Carr expected to be back. So Carolina obviously has been a plush matchup for every position on the board throughout the entire year. Derek Carr is on the back end QB2 radar and obviously could have a lot more. This isn't the same Saints team that we saw earlier in the season. A little bit different now. Chris Olave has been banged up. Hasn't shown that he's essentially the same guy that we've seen in the past. But I think Chris Olave could be a good buy low person, like a person you could probably buy as a wide receiver 3 right now, before we see him and Carr on the same page again without Rashid Shaheed. Bub Memes is also questionable, and I'm assuming either him or Mason Tipton, one of these two, or MVS, even one of these receivers is going to, like, Derek Carr doesn't just throw to only one player. Derek Carr will spread the ball out. And that Rashid Shaheed role is void. So my gut says like maybe MVS has a couple big catches throughout the rest of the year. Isn't Rashid Shaheed in any form or fashion. But one of these players, I'm assuming, will have some days here. If I had to put my guess on the pecking order, it would be MVS coming in playing the vet role. Bub Memes would be next. And then we'd probably see Tipton continue to be up and down throughout the rest of the season. But I think MVS will get an extended look here over the next week or two. And then Alvin Kamara in a plus matchup against Carolina. They have been the worst team this year against running backs. That's been interchangeable here over the last couple weeks, but Carolina continues to be a bottom team against the run game. We've seen Buffalo and Dallas also be in contention for this, but it feels like every time Carolina seems to work their way back up into this worst team against running backs ranking. So plus matchup here for Alvin Kamara. Obviously, fire him up as a top 5 option for this week. And then the tight ends, we got back Taysom Hill last week. He was in a limited practice today. Should be good to go for this week. I'm assuming, again, a very high upside, low floor option at tight end. As far as the Carolina side of the ball goes, we are getting another start out of Bryce Young. So, we saw a mixed bag with him, and I think it's not about Bryce Young because I don't think too many people are starting Bryce Young, even in Superflex leagues. It really comes to can this offense move the ball with Bryce Young? We saw elements of that last week, but you'd like to see more, right? We would like to see more for Xavier Legette and even a guy like Jalen Coker or potentially Adam Thielen returning. We'd like to see a little bit more from Bryce. So hopefully he looks a lot better than he did week 1 against the same New Orleans Saints defense. But the Saints have been a bottom 10 team against the receiver position. So I would say Xavier Legette is on the flex radar, potentially wide receiver 3, depending on how deep your rosters are. But I would start him as a high upside flex play. And I think as a wide receiver 3, there are some lowlights that could happen this week. The team will also need Jalen Coker to step up. And if you're not familiar with Jalen Coker, he's an undrafted player, played really well last week. The team has been, obviously willing to put him in good situations, good ball he's able to track the ball really well. So I feel good about Jalen Coker as a deep league flex, more 14-16 team flex option, but he is on the flex radar in your deeper leagues. I'll say that because this could be a receiver that's featured throughout the rest of the year alongside Legette, especially if Adam Thielen is to get traded, which I can see a world where Adam Thielen is traded at the deadline, especially since it has got rid of Deontay Johnson. Thielen is questionable to play. He was his 21-day practice window was activated last week, and he's been getting in some practices. So There's a chance that he could see the field this weekend. If it's not this weekend, for sure, it will be next. But make sure Adam Thielen isn't floating around in your, I would say, your 12-team leagues or even your 10-team leagues, just in case there is a trade after this week. This seems like a feature game for Adam Thielen. He'll get a few opportunities to show that he still has it. So all depends on how Bryce Young plays. As far as Chuba Hubbard goes, continue to start him as a back-end RB2. He is losing steam very quickly here. Carolina Panthers have a bye in Week 11. In this week, Jonathan Brooks did get in a full practice. So earlier this offseason, I had talked about Jonathan Brooks, and I said, there's a chance that we wouldn't see the real Jonathan Brooks until like Week 10 or Week 12. Week 9, this is about the time where we're going to start to see Jonathan Brooks get opportunity if he is able to be on the field. He'll probably get somewhere between 6 to 10 carries just to see how healthy he is. And just know, like, there's a world of outcomes that could happen here. He pops off and he's able to see some receptions in the passing game. He has a couple long runs that make us think, oh shit, Jonathan Brooks is back. You would think the team is going to slowly work him in and probably over the course of the season, either keep him in a timeshare with Chuba Hubbard or week 16 through 18, see what he has showcase-wise. If you've not traded for Jonathan Brooks, now might be a good time to float out lower-end offers, because that's the plus side of this thing, is that he shows us he does have RB2 ceiling the rest of the fantasy year. And then we see a reduction in touches out of Chuba Hubbard. The more practical scenario is that Jonathan Brooks comes in and he gets his 6 to 10 touches, and he's somewhere in the 20 to 40 yard marker, probably doesn't get a touchdown, maybe sees a reception or none in the passing game, and you're wondering, okay, when do I start Jonathan Brooks? That's the more practical scenario, and we're probably in a timeshare. So I think with Chuba Hubbard, there's going to be a lot of people that want to just get rid of him. And this matchup against New Orleans is a pretty favorable matchup for running backs. They've been a bottom 10 team against the running back position. I think Chuba Hubbard will retain his RB2 value at least until the bye week. And I think Jonathan Brooks will start to emerge as a flex candidate with potential upside as the season goes on. I think for now, if he does play, I leave Jonathan Brooks on the bench. I leave Chuba Hubbard in starting lineups as a low-end RB2 until we see Jonathan Brooks take over. All right? So I know there's going to be a lot of questions on Chuba Hubbard. If you can move Chuba Hubbard as an RB2 or better, I would recommend doing that. Most times you're not going to get that out of Chuba Hubbard. And the big question is it going to be now, week 9, where this change happens? Is it week 12? Is it week 15? Is it even this season? So I would say don't just flat out drop Chuba Hubbard or get scared and say, oh, Jonathan Brooks is back now. It's over for him. Just know this could be a slower timeline than you and I think. It can be an accelerated timeline. I think more of the in-between there. Like we probably see week 14 or 15 is when we see Jonathan Brooks really start to ramp up more. All right? So if you have Jonathan Brooks, if you can get him now, get him. The window might close. It might stay open. There's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to these running backs. You and I don't know what that looks like until Jonathan Brooks gets on the field. Good matchup this week against New Orleans to see what it looks like. All right, that's the Carolina side of things. Sorry, I know I took a little bit of extra time on that. I just want to go into detail because I know there's people out there with Chuba Hubbard and with Jonathan Brooks, and I want to make sure you guys, the expectations aren't set like Jonathan Brooks is back. Time to get him in the lineup. Like, I would temper it. If he pops off, you know what you have the rest of the year. I would temper your expectations. Even though you've been holding on to him, you drafted him as an RB2, you've been holding on to him all year, I would temper expectations or try to get him at a reasonable cost if you can in trade. All right, moving on to Denver and Baltimore. Denver, Baltimore. YouTube, appreciate you guys tapping in. If you have not subbed to the YouTube page, you can go back to the YouTube and rewatch all of this. It is in full form and fashion on there. I have it also labeled for each individual game. You guys can go back and watch this at scale. Denver and Baltimore. Now, Denver been one of the surprising teams of this year, and that's obviously been led by Bo Nix, who has played incredibly this year, incredibly well. I know at the beginning of the year I was kind of down on him, but he's definitely proved me wrong very quickly here and been a startable asset in fantasy, not just in Superflex leagues, but even as a deeper option, like 12-team option, single QB league. So he's going up against the number one team in yards allowed to quarterbacks. They give up passing yards. We know this about Baltimore, and Denver probably will keep this game. This is a 9.5 point total. I don't know about that. Denver has been keeping games close, and we saw Baltimore last week lose to Cleveland. So I know this. Damn, this is one of them. I'll probably have to think a little bit more on this one, but this is one of those spots where the line, it says take Denver, but Baltimore is probably, I don't know. I'll talk about that another time. But Bo Nix in a plus matchup here on paper enters the mid-tier to high-end QB2 radar this week for me in fantasy. So although I have not been showing a lot of love to Bo Nix, definitely deserves it in a plus matchup here this week. Courtland Sutton is going to be on the opposite side. This Baltimore team has been kind of like Jekyll and Hyde sometimes. They give up a lot of yards. Other times, they'll be able to limit it a little bit more. But Courtland Sutton, even going up against Marlon Humphrey, should be a wide receiver 3 on the week. We also have options. Troy Franklin, we've seen him have some decent days over the last couple weeks. And Devon Vele has also had a couple games here. So just know there's some outside options here for your flex spots if you need them. I would prefer to not start these guys, but this is a good matchup for both Franklin and for Vele. If you have a chance to, if you're desperate and you need a wide receiver start, more specifically in your deeper leagues, then those are two options you might be able to find some value out of a plus matchup here. And then as far as the run game goes, this could be a slower game here for Javonte Williams, especially if this game script does get out of hand. He could struggle here against this Baltimore front. So be careful with Javonte Williams and just throwing him in there off the last few weeks. He's looked a lot better than he has over the start of the season. In this matchup, he's more RB3-ish to me than he is RB2-ish. More of a flex play. So if you have a stronger RB2 candidate, I would probably prefer them over Javonte this week. And then as far as Baltimore goes, Denver has been an elite defense too. We talked about like Miami kind of being a surprise defense, Washington really stepping it up as of late. I mean, this Denver defense has been top 5 against receivers, really a no-fly zone when it comes to the passing game. They also limit things really well. Like just because they're a lower scoring team in general, they play defense well, they run the clock really well coached team. But Lamar Jackson, no matter what, is QB proof, and also got a new weapon in Diontae Johnson, who is expected to play this week. So even in a tough matchup, I'm starting Lamar at home. This is a player you do not bench under no circumstances, right? Unless you're debating some of these other high-end, you have Jalen Hurts on your team too, or Josh Allen on your team too. Now it can be debatable, but in other circumstances, it does not matter the matchup with Lamar Jackson. We will see him use his legs, whatever he needs to get it done. As far as the receivers, now this is probably going to be the biggest question is, now that Diontae Johnson has been traded to the Ravens, what does this look like for his fantasy value, Zay Flowers' fantasy value, Rashad Bateman's fantasy value, right? We obviously saw the bad drop by Rashad Bateman, ball hit him right in the face. But for now, this kind of profiles as an inconsistent option for Zay Flowers and Diontae Johnson. I would say Zay Flowers is still the leader of this passing game, right? He's still the guy that they want to feature, the guy they spent the first round draft pick on, the one who's going to see the most targets in this passing game. I think it's Zay Flowers. I think Rashad Bateman will still be the downfield, kind of like a little bit longer than intermediate throw. Like he's going to be the guy they still target downfield, still going to see somewhere in that 3 to 5 target range on a week-to-week basis. Really kind of touchdown or big play dependent as far as his flex value for the week. And I think Diontae Johnson kind of fills an elevated role of what they hoped Nelson Agholor could be as like the wide receiver 3 for this team. Now, I think he will play better than Nelson Agholor has played. But I also think he's going to be a very tough player to trust in fantasy. We know he will drop the ball at times, but I think Diontae Johnson is now in flex territory at best. I would stay away from Deontay Johnson, and if I could pair him in a deal right now, I would probably try to get the name value off. But I think this could be a very ugly situation for Deontay Johnson, Rashad Bateman specifically. And at times, it's going to get a little uglier for Zay Flowers. All right, so Zay Flowers has played as a wide receiver 2 so far this season. He's going to tear down for me. Bateman's been a flex this season. He is going to tear down for me. Deontay Johnson has been a flex this year, maybe wide receiver 3 if you want to call him that. He has teared down for me. Hurts all the receivers because this game runs through Derrick Henry. And as tough as this team has been, this Denver defense has been against the passing game, they've been equally as tough against the run game, a top 10 team against the running backs as well. But Derrick Henry's matchup proof, so he's going to go in the top 5 no matter what for me this week. Feel good about Derrick Henry no matter what, even given the matchup. And then for Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, I think we're starting to see this thing shake out the way it's supposed to. Going to get a little murkier with Deontay Johnson now in the fold, but Mark Andrews is kind of shaped into this back end, mid-tier, tight end 1, low ceiling. And I think we've kind of seen Isaiah Likely, be this upside, kind of risky tight end 2 on a week-to-week basis. And I think that remains this way against the Denver defense that, like I said, has been pretty good just overall in general. All right, moving on. Somebody who watching right now, random user, getting a sub. I feel good right now. Feel good. Somebody just got a sub. I don't know who it was. Congratulations, some random person who sat through the whole thing, man, just got a sub. If you've been watching and you got a sub, appreciate you. Appreciate you tapping in and watching the whole time, man. Shout out to you. Jacksonville and Philly. Now, this is another matchup I thought would be a little higher scoring. Jacksonville and Philadelphia. Only 45 points on the board here. But for Jacksonville, right, obviously losing their, a key receiver in Christian Kirk. And that's going to be, as much as we haven't got fantasy-wise out of Christian Kirk, he's a vital part of this offense, even when Evan Ingram is healthy. He just gives that safety valve to Trevor Lawrence. And then Brian Thomas, a little banged up for this week as well. I think the expectation is that he's going to have a chance to give it a go this weekend, but a little uncertainty around his status as well. And then Gabe Davis dealing with an injury as well. I mean, Gabe Davis is Gabe Davis. But I think I would tear down Trevor Lawrence this week and put him more into like this back-end QB2 sector. I haven't really had him in. I've kind of just kept him as this middling tight end 2 and wanting to like see that next step for him. It's just not happening. So I think there's some other quarterbacks I would show love to this. Like Bo Nix, I would start over Trevor Lawrence this week. And it really wouldn't be close. Like a Joe Flacco to me, I'm going to start over Trevor Lawrence this week. So he's going to be kind of hard to trust in a matchup that doesn't have as many points as some of the others. And then plus, like I said, the options may not be there. So obviously getting ETN back, getting Evan Ingram back over the last couple weeks has helped. I still have him as a back end to mid-tier QB2 this week. As far as receivers go, like I said, Brian Thomas, if he plays, we're going to call him a wide receiver 2 almost any given week. But we got to see if he's out there on the field. And so that's the key thing. Is he playing? Is Gabe Davis playing? Because if neither of them are able to give it a go, now we got Parker Washington, who all of a sudden enters this wide receiver 3 range. And then if they do play, now, maybe I'm calling Parker Washington more of a flex at best. Just because the offense is going to go through Evan Ingram first, Brian Thomas first, before it ever goes through like a Parker Washington. So if you are looking for flex players, I think Parker Washington is, I think he's more of a play if Brian Thomas is not able to give it a go. That's when I would play Parker Washington. But for now, I think we got to call him a flex, wide receiver 3 at best if Brian Thomas is not able to give it a go. As far as Tank Bigsby, he will be an RB2 this week if Travis Etienne cannot play, but Travis Etienne is expected back. So Travis Etienne working his way back right now. I think the expectation is that he could be on the field for this matchup. If he is on the field for this matchup, it now complicates a lot of things. We have Tank Bigsby, who now goes from RB2 to more of like an RB3 play, high upside flex. We have Travis Etienne, who now is back on the flex radar. And it could be even more, that's just me assuming that Bigsby's going to see a little bit more of a workload this week than ETN. We could see ETN take over much more work. When it was a couple weeks ago when Travis Etienne got banged up initially, they said, is Tank Bigsby, has he taken over? They said, no, Travis Etienne is still the guy. And then over the last couple weeks, we've seen Tank Bigsby just kind of dominate in this role. It's hard for me to put Travis Etienne as a starter right now because I think Tank Bigsby has taken over. But there is a world where Tank Bigsby is still viewed in the Jaguars locker room as the B in this 1A, 1B. There is that world still. And maybe they were letting Travis Etienne get healthy in order to prove that. I think in this game, which features a negative game script, Travis Etienne is a flex. And I think he has upside to be an RB2. Whereas I think Tank Bigsby, if they both play, Tank Bigsby is like a high upside flex, RB3, with really more of the floor instead of the ceiling. If that makes sense. Like I think there's a world where Travis Etienne gets more work, plays well, and as the RB2 gets involved in the passing game. I also think if they both play, Tank Bigsby's probably going to see somewhere around 12 carries, have somewhere around 60, 70 yards, potential at a score. So both of them are flex plays for me if you need it. I think Travis Etienne offers higher upside. I think Tank Bigsby offers better floor. And then as far as Evan Ingram goes, he's in a tough matchup, but you're playing Evan Ingram as a top 3 play. I don't care what the matchup is. He's essentially the number 1 receiver. For Philly, it is all of the usual suspects. A plus matchup on paper for every single player you are considering playing. Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, all very elite options this week. Devontae Smith is a high upside wide receiver 2. A.J. Brown is an elite wide receiver 1. Jalen Hurts probably going to be my number 1 quarterback off the board, especially after what we saw last week. And then Saquon Barkley will be a top 3 play at running back this week as well. Jacksonville has not been able to stop anybody at any position so far this year. Dallas Goedert has not returned to practice, so if you're hoping to get him back this week, he has an outside chance. We need to see limited practice on Thursday or full practice on Friday. Moving on. We got three more afternoon games here. We got Chicago and Arizona. Now, Caleb Williams is in a plus matchup, but he's really been up and down this year. He's been a player that's been kind of tough to trust. Sometimes in plus matchups, he doesn't look good, and other times in bad matchups, he looks the part. So Arizona has been forgiving the quarterbacks, and I think this is, he's a middling QB2 right now. Could have a 300-yard day, could have a 175-yard day with 2 touchdowns. I think I would trust him as a middle-tier QB2 in Superflex. He's a start. In your single QB leagues, you probably have a better option, even though this is a plus matchup. But as far as the receivers go, DJ Moore a little bit banged up. I think he's expected to give it a go this week. I love the matchup for him, and I really love the matchup for Keenan Allen this week. I think Keenan Allen bounces back. Had 7 targets last week, but unfortunately only saw 2 catches in the passing game. So I think this is a get-right game for Keenan Allen. It's been tough to trust a lot of these Bears receivers because of the up-and-down nature of Caleb Williams in his passing game in general. But I think this is a good bounce-back spot for Keenan Allen. Romo Dunze also has a little bit of upside as a deeper league flex. As far as the run game goes, you can call DeAndre Swift an upside RB2. He's proven week in and week out that he belongs in this high-end RB2, back-end RB1 range. I think for this week, I'd call him a high upside RB2, back-end RB1 in your deeper leagues. And then as far as the tight end goes, Cole Kmet continues to serve as a high-end tight end 2 for the week. There's not a lot of points here, which is kind of surprising. I would think, like, this game kind of profiled to me as more of like a 48.5, 49 point total. So I'm kind of surprised, especially because this is indoors too. So I don't know if this is just that Chicago defense talking or maybe the uncertainty with Caleb Williams, but this felt like this should have been a little bit higher total than 44.5. As far as Arizona goes, tough matchup here. Tough matchup for Kyler Murray. I talked about that earlier with one of the questions that came in. You still start Kyler Murray. You still start Kyler Murray, even in the tough matchup, because of the rushing floor. It's just you got to temper your expectations with the ceiling. Chances are the ceiling isn't as high for him this game. But you still have him. He's going to be a mid-tier to back-end QB1 play, probably more back-end QB1 than he is mid-tier QB1. And I will say this, like Chicago, for everything they're able to stop in the passing game, they can be a little vulnerable at times to running quarterbacks. So feel good about Kyler Murray, like as a potential. And we saw Kyler Murray do this in a tough matchup a couple weeks ago, where he had that long 50-yard scamper. That was a tough matchup for him on paper. So don't worry too much about Kyler Murray. He has been matchup proof, but didn't Call of Duty just come out? And then when we're talking about Harrison, obviously a tough matchup against Jalen Johnson there on the other side. We've seen Marvin Harrison be really up and down this year, so I would expect a lot of attention to go his way. But then also we have Michael Wilson, who does now have some deep league appeal, especially if Jalen Johnson is kind of shadowing or decides he's going to guard Jalen Johnson, or to guard Marvin Harrison, for the most part. So Michael Wilson does have some deep flex appeal. That's about it. I would call James Conner a start this week against the Bears, especially if if you're going to beat the Bears some form or fashion. Like, you got to get some scores on the ground. I think James Conner has a decent chance to score this week on the ground as well. And then in this middling matchup, we've also seen like Trey McBride. As much as we've wanted Marvin Harrison to be the guy, it feels like McBride is the consistent option in the passing game for this Cardinals passing attack. So obviously, McBride, a top 5 option at tight end this week, coming off of a 100-yard game last week. Detroit and Green Bay. 20. All right. Detroit and Green Bay, this Lions passing attack has been damn near, it's hard to stop this thing, right? You got Jahmyr Gibbs busting 70-yard runs. You got Amon-Ra St. Brown any given week could pop off. Sam Laporta is another threat here. They'll throw it to the backup tight end. We're seeing David Montgomery pound the ball into the end zone. So your usual suspects here, Jared Goff is a high-end QB2 in this matchup as normal. And that's really just for the fact that this Green Bay defense has been pretty good in stopping and slowing down passing attacks, right? So when you think about like Jared Goff and what he brings to the table, a lot of it is through the volume in the passing game. But we saw like other players will throw a touchdown. They'll throw touchdowns to, they'll throw, red zone looks to the offensive linemen, as we saw in the Dallas game. Like, they really do try to get everyone involved here. So it does limit his upside. And then he's also playing outdoors where he doesn't always play his best. Typically indoors is where we see Jared Goff play a little bit better. He's a high-end QB2 for me this week, given the matchup against Green Bay. And there's also the potential that like Malik Willis comes in here and slows this thing down. They go to the run game a little bit more if Jordan Love is not able to play. Also potential for rain in this game, as we talked about earlier. As far as receivers go, I think we know this is Amon-Ra St. Brown or bust. That's how we play this thing. As far as the run game goes, you're playing Jahmyr Gibbs as a high-end running back. And then you're also playing Dave Montgomery as a high-end RB2. So usual suspects there. And then obviously for Sam Laporta, fire him up plus matchup for Sam Laporta this week against Green Bay. They've been bottom 10 team against the tight end position. But we're good to see Sam Laporta get in the end zone last week and give a little bit of return here to the guys that drafted him early on. As far as Green Bay goes, a lot of question marks on this side. If Jordan Love is able to give it a go due to his groin injury, and obviously he might even be a little bit limited. He looked a little banged up last week, so he's kind of more risky than I'd want to say. I'd love to call him a top 5 option, which he's looked the part most of the year. But after last week, I think we've got to, he looked banged up even in the game. So we got to tear him down a little bit. He's a back-end QB1 if he's able to give it a go. Malik Willis is obviously kind of off the radar as a back-end QB2 in Superflex leagues if he's able to give it a go. But it does change things. Like, this Green Bay passing attack has already been super inconsistent from a receiver standpoint. Most of the time we see Jayden Reed play like a top 12 guy, but then over the last couple weeks, we've seen him kind of start to fall off. Well, not fall off, just be a little bit more inconsistent. So your Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Dante Wicks, all these guys are just going to play into this Green Bay receiving core, and it could get a little ugly throughout the year. I would still trust Jayden Reed as the one receiver I'd want to start on this team. And then Romeo Doubs offering flex appeal. And, we're just kind of getting middling production out of all these receivers. So just be very careful with anybody not named Jayden Reed. And even with Jayden Reed, the floor is a lot lower than we think. Especially if, even if Malik Willis comes in, it's like, there's varying results when it comes to this team and these receivers. that might, and I have Jayden Reed on the team, and I've kind of debated, like, how do you value Jayden Reed? Is he a player that you want to keep? Is he a top 10 to 12 guy rest of the year? And I think overall, he'll probably project out to be that. He kind of reminds me of like a Debo. I think I mentioned this before. Kind of reminds me of Debo. We'll give you some in the run game, some in the passing game. There's going to be some games where he looks like it's completely out of the game plan. And then other times where it looks like he's being force-fed the ball because of his ability. So I think just know with Jayden Reed, there's going to be some down spots. But for the most part, he's going to fit in as a top 15 guy the rest of the way. That's kind of how I view him, a top 15 guy. And then as far as the running backs as far as Josh Jacobs goes, he missed practice today. He told reporters that he was going to be available for week 9, but we've also heard Josh Jacobs say things like this in the past and then troll us because he doesn't care about us fantasy football players. If you remember Josh Jacobs in the fantasy championship, or maybe it was the week before the fantasy championship, he pulled the rug out on us before. So you want to make sure he's on the practice field. I think that's more important than any words he's going to throw our way. We want to see Josh Jacobs practice before he gets on the field for this week. And then Tucker Kraft, I think, in a tough matchup against Detroit. And Josh Jacobs is going to be an RB2 this week. Detroit obviously shuts down running backs with the best of them. He would be an RB2 at best this week. And it might even be a trade target after this week. I think after this week, we could see Josh Jacobs kind of be one of those, buy low type players, especially if he doesn't perform well. And then, like I said, Tucker Kraft, you could throw him in there as more of a high-end tight end 2, back-end tight end 1, has spike potential. But especially if Malik Willis starts, he'll be a tight end 2 this week. All right. And then Rams and Seattle before I get into the night games. It was good to see Matt Stafford back, this passing attack back, Cooper Kupp back, Puka Nacua back. Just this offense looked like it did earlier in the year. So they had 10 days rest, a chance to get back. They got right. We saw Puka on the field, obviously a little, wasn't playing his full set of snaps. Cooper Kupp looked, he looked good, but then also looked like he could probably still be a little bit limited, movement-wise. Didn't look like the Cooper Kupp we expected. Both of these guys are top 15 plays for me moving forward. I would want to think that Cooper Kupp is the better option, but from what I saw on the field, this also projects as like a Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs type thing for now. Until something changes, Puka Nacua was getting the better looks downfield. So I think if I had to rank them, I'm going to rank them very closely this week as high upside wide receiver 2, back end wide receiver 1s. I think I would love to sit here and tell you guys I think Cooper Kupp is the better option right now, but just looking at the quality of targets last week, the red zone stuff was going mostly to Cooper Kupp. The downfield stuff, more consistent stuff, was going to Puka Nacua. Could have been matchup. We'll find out a lot more this week. For now, I would rank Puka Nacua slightly over Cooper Kupp. And you guys know, I'm going to give it to you straight. That's just what I see on the field. That's what it looks like for now. Things change. So for now, that's what it looks like. And obviously, Stafford is a middle to high-end QB2 in this matchup against Seattle. As far as the ground game goes, continue to trust Kyren Williams. No reason not to until we see anything from him. Like, he is an elite and probably a top 3 option at running back for me this week against Seattle. Seattle's been a bottom 7 team against the running back position. But Kyren has been as elite as it gets. And for those who got him, maybe because of some of the punt return rumors, or if you were concerned about Blake Corum and he slipped through the cracks and you got him in the 3rd round, he's been a godsend for your team this year in a year where running backs, are at a premium. So congratulations to those who got Kyren Williams and proving people like me wrong who expected him to probably get banged up at some point. He has played phenomenal this year and looks to be probably a top 3 asset as he has been throughout this fantasy season so far at the running back position. And then as far as Seattle goes, this could be a good division matchup with a lot of points here on the board, 48.5. So feel good about Geno Smith going in your lineups, even though last week, we didn't get the Geno that we wanted. DK Metcalf expected to be back as well this week, have an outside chance of playing before they go into their bye. Excuse me. But there's potential rain at this game as well. So just keep an eye on the rain. Like I said, more so I'm more concerned about the wind when it comes to this, but we saw last week, even in Seattle, they had a wet football in that game too. So just know that like that could be a factor in the game. It's not a overlying, don't you bench Geno, bench DK, bench it. It's just a factor that could impact the game, especially if win becomes involved. But Geno to me is a high-end QB2 this week. And in the receivers, if DK does play, I'm going to tear him down a little bit just because they might limit his snaps going into the bye. So typically I would say, listen, DK plays, you start him and you treat him as a high-end wide receiver 2, back-end wide receiver 1. I would tear that down. Just know that he's coming off of something that's supposed to be week to week, hasn't gotten the practice yet, and could be on limited snaps or limited workload, a slight chance to re-injure himself during this game. I would tier DK Metcalf down into the back-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 range. Jason's on the flex radar. As much as I've hoped he had kind of take a major step, he's took a step up. It's just been an incremental step as opposed to like a major leap. And then when it comes to Kenneth Walker, feel good about him going up against this Rams team. Should continue to be a top 10 running back for the rest of the way in a plus matchup here on paper. And then this is a good, obviously, if you're looking for tight ends this week, I talked about Kittle and Freiermuth being on bye this week. Noah Fant, for those who are looking for desperation tight end plays, Noah Fant could be a player that that could at least get you a nice little floor. He's been playing well as of late. All right, Indy, Minnesota. Minnesota 5.5-point favorites with Flacco starting. Flacco! Guys, about to change the game, AR-15. It's really not even AR-15. Somebody mentioned that in the comments. That's just the old nickname. But Anthony Richardson's been benched. And what that means is we get Joe Flacco moving forward. So if you have Anthony Richardson and you are somehow 6 wins or better, I think if you're in a super flex league, I would hold. If you're in a single QB league, send them away. If you only have 5 wins or less and you're in a super flex league, I think you could find better, and hopefully you have better. If you have more than 3 quarterbacks, like he's your 4th, you got to make the playoffs. I think that's more important than anything. So when it comes to Anthony Richardson, we're not going to see him on the field. Pretend he's on IR and you don't have an IR spot. And even when he's played, he hasn't looked the part. He has not been the QB1 overall or at all that we drafted him to be. So I think when it comes to Anthony Richardson, you chalk it up as a miss. You determine for your team if you have the bench spot to hold him in a 12-team league or higher. If it's 10 teams or less, get rid of him, obviously. But in 12-team leagues or higher, he's a tough hold. I will say that. If you have the cojones, you want to see this thing through in hopes that he gets an opportunity after the Colts Week 14 bye, that I think would be the earliest that we see him on the field, barring a Joe Flacco injury. For now, it's the end of the Anthony Richardson experiment, at least for this season. There's an outside chance during the fantasy football playoffs that we see him, and it would be a very tough start. I would say that either way. So after the Week 15 bye is when fantasy playoffs start, Week 15. And it's a player that you invested good draft capital on. We haven't had a whole lot of these guys where it hasn't been injury-based yet that we need to just flat out drop. I think at this point, I might call Anthony Richardson a drop, especially if you're a team fighting for the playoffs, because there's a very real possibility you go on a winning streak here and you do make the playoffs and you have to play Week 15 and he comes back. You ain't playing him anyway. So if you can send him out a deal, somebody else believes in him, the 8-0 team, the 7-1 team, the 6-2 team, if they believe in him, send him off. If not, it's a lost cause. It happens. Joe Flacco now enters QB2 territory. And in this matchup, Minnesota has been a plus matchup on paper for quarterbacks and for receivers. So Joe Flacco belongs in starting lineups as a as a mid-tier QB2 this week, and does provide some upside in this matchup. So obviously the main thing here is the receivers, right? Like your Pittman, Josh Downs, your Alec Pierce, A.D. Mitchell. So what does this look like moving forward for the receiving corps? And I think I'd rather have Michael Pittman than Josh Downs. But with Flacco, Josh Downs has been producing at a really high level. And Josh Downs, I mean, this guy is a good receiver. He was one of those underrated players coming into his rookie year, a guy that probably slipped because of the size, but he slipped in the draft, in the NFL draft. He was supposed to be a higher first round, second round guy, slipped to the 3rd round. So he has produced at a high level this year. Michael Pittman has not, and also is dealing with that injury. Like, I think it's easy to forget that he probably is just, manning up with it right now. But Michael Pittman has been dealing with the injury still. I think they are both wide receiver threes for me this week with Flacco starting. I would prefer Pittman over Downs, and I would change my mind very quickly here if we saw Josh Downs have a strong game on Sunday night. Slots tend to do well against Minnesota. Josh Downs is a sneaky upside play this week at wide receiver 3. He's not a flex. He's a wide receiver 3. As far as A.D. Mitchell and Pierce, both of those guys have upside. They're just super low floor. I would prefer they stay on benches. But would not be shocking to see one of those guys get a shot downfield with Flacco playing. And then as far as the ground game goes, Minnesota's been, tough against running backs, but you're not benching Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, he looked smooth last week. I was kind of worried about him coming off the ankle. Looked smooth, looked apart. He's good to go. Continue to trust Jonathan Taylor as a high-end running back option. As far as Minnesota goes, listen, I know Sam Darnold was really, really good to start the year, but I think he's still going to be he's not elite, and he's not a QB1. He's just a middling QB2 option. He's just at a lesser scale what like Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff offer. And even in this matchup at home, I think there might be some games where he throws for 3 touchdowns. There's going to be a game where he throws for 300. I just think those games are less compared to the games where he's throwing 1 to 2 touchdowns and when he's throwing for 225 to 250 yards. So I think he fits in as more of a middling QB2, even though this matchup is a decent matchup for him on paper. I would put him as a QB2 against this Colts team. As far as receivers go, you already know to start Justin Jefferson, but I think where we could find a little value is with Jordan Addison this week and potentially a couple shots downfield against this Colts secondary. So Jordan Addison is a high upside flex for me this week. We'll probably put him maybe even back in wide receiver 3, but probably more so as a high upside flex, even in the return of TJ Hawkinson this week. So I think I would play Jordan Addison this week and feel good about getting him into the lineup. But we also do get the return of TJ Hawkinson this week. So if you've been holding on to TJ Hawkinson, you probably have a lot of questions. Do you start him? I think the answer is if you have a normal top 10 option, leave him on your bench. If you have a player like, say you've been starting a Tucker Kraft, or you've been starting a Cole Kmet, or maybe you've been starting Hunter Henry for whatever reason. If you've been starting one of these middling options, I'm okay with you playing TJ Hawkinson in his return on Sunday Night Football. There's an outside chance that this team looks to get him involved and get him a touchdown in his return on the field. We see that sometimes. We saw it with Nick Chubb earlier in the year. The Colts have been a bottom 5 team against the tight end position, but this has more to do with just TJ Hawkinson overall. He's a talented player, but just know that the workload might be limited. It could be injury related. It could be, we don't know what his actual production on the field is going to be. He might not have the same explosiveness, and I wouldn't expect that with him coming off of this injury and only having been 21 days removed from being on IR. So I would expect limited workload. I would expect limited production, but if I had a middling tight end 2 option, I think TJ Hawkinson is worth the start. Or if you, like I said, you got Killer Freiermuth, feel free to put him in. And then when it comes to Aaron Jones, obviously feel good about him as a high upside running back 2 this week, back in RB1, plus matchup on paper against this Colts front line. They did get DeForest Buckner back, so that could slow things down just a little bit. The Colts have been a pretty bad team against the running back position throughout the year, but they did get the return of DeForest Buckner, which should make this unit a little bit better than it had been against the running back position. And in the last game, and I'm gonna get into a couple questions, and then I gotta get out of here a little quicker than I wanted to today. Tampa Bay and Kansas City. Obviously, we saw Baker go ham last week without his starting receivers, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin out. But I think in this matchup, obviously this Kansas City team has been pretty good for the most part, just in general, against, just as a defense, they've been good. The weird thing is against quarterbacks, they haven't been as good, but I would still be very cautious with Baker Mayfield this week, especially with the limited resources. So we saw Jalen McMillan play decent last week, had a couple opportunities he didn't take advantage of. One of them, I think he either ran the wrong route, didn't see the pass coming his way. miscommunication, whatever it was. But Jalen McMillan does still seem to have the best opportunities out of this unit. Talked about Sterling Shepard being questionable for this week. And Trey Palmer really didn't give us much in the receiving game. So if I was going to start any receiver this week against this Kansas City secondary, it would be Jalen McMillan. Just know he might, there's a potential that he could disappoint as well. I would think he would be an upside flex. I would avoid starting Trey Palmer in this matchup. As far as the running backs go, Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, continue to trust them as like RB2 and RB3 respectively. And Rachaad White, good to see him like getting a little bit more involved. So him and Bucky Irving seem to have a pretty good grasp on this thing. Sean Tucker has been the odd man out now that they're both healthy. Kansas City it was Detroit. They are now the top team against running backs, just for the record. But the good thing about Rachaad White, he gets involved in the passing game. Bucky Irving seems to run well no matter the front line. So I would feel good about both of them. Like I said, Irving as a flex, Rachaad White as a RB2. And then Cade Otton, fresh off of a strong play last week, has been strong throughout the last couple weeks. Walks into the best matchup for tight ends throughout this year against this Kansas City team. So Cade Otton is a top 8 option for me at tight end this week, just like he was last week. Remember, wasn't there somebody who was like, oh, are we fading Cade Otton? Who was it? Somebody asked me that last week. A lot of TikTokers are saying to fade Cade Otton. You see why you don't do that. You see why you don't just say random things just to go against the grain. You lean into the matchups. You lean into the players in the situation. And Cade Otton right now is the #1 target for this Tampa Bay team. He's the most consistent, trusted player for Baker Mayfield. So continue to lead into that. Obviously, a plus matchup on paper for him. So, yeah. I said that last week. I probably should have dropped that as a clip, but that's why you got to be careful who you listen to, man. That was weird to see. I forgot who said that. Somebody said that in the comments. They were like, TikTokers are saying to fade Cade Otton. I hope you didn't last week. So, and then as far as the Kansas City side goes, obviously this Tampa Bay team has been eaten alive by the passing game. So Patrick Mahomes is a back-end QB1. He returns to the back-end QB1 tier for me this week at home in Monday night in Arrowhead against this Tampa Bay secondary. And I also think we see a little bit more out of DeAndre Hopkins than we did last week, right? Like he didn't see the field a whole lot, only saw a couple snaps out the slot. But I think it's about knowing the playbook and getting up to speed with everything. So if you have DeAndre Hopkins and you saw him last week, and I told you guys I thought he was more of a flex than like a wide receiver 2. And I think until we see him grow into this role a little bit over the next week or two, we're probably going to keep him more in that wide receiver 3 land. I think the player that might be still a little underrated is Juju in this whole thing, if he's able to give it a go. He was not on the practice field today, so still limited by his hamstring. I don't know if this is a 2-3 week thing or if this is something that he's going to be back, this week. But I think he's still a name to watch because I still think we got to remember D-Hop is still dealing with that knee injury. So hopefully they get him up to speed. Hopefully it's more work that's coming his way. And this is just me being a little bit paranoid about the situation. But D-Hop, they traded for him for a reason. This is the kind of matchup where we could see him go crazy. Obviously, and Xavier Worthy as well has a lot of upside this week in this matchup. It's a plus matchup for the entire receiving core here. But Xavier Worthy will probably see a couple opportunities downfield against this Tampa secondary. This is also Kareem Hunt territory here, especially the 9-point total here lets you know that there's probably a positive game script here in line for this Kansas City team. So Kareem Hunt belongs in the RB2 range, the high end to mid-tier RB2 range, probably a potential score here for him. The major concern about him is like his value, at least at this level, might be coming to an end. Isaiah Pacheco expected to be back here in the next week or two. So as we get more information, I will keep you guys updated. But for now, continue to treat Kareem Hunt as the running back he is. And I think at worst, we need to talk about this as a split once Isaiah Pacheco comes back. This isn't something where I think Kareem Hunt just loses all of his workload, all right? But for now, it doesn't matter. Kareem Hunt goes in. Isaiah Pacheco is not on the field. Kareem Hunt is a high-end running back 2. Maybe even back in RB1. And as far as Travis Kelce, it's good to see him getting back on track. Continue to trust Travis Kelce. He will be good to go for this week. I don't think there's any concerns about him. All right. And that does it for Stardom Situm today. I got a few questions I'll get to, and then I gotta dip out of here, guys. As far as we got some supers that came in. What up, Jayhan? I'm 5-3. Here's the team: JD, AK, K9, Reek Tay, JSN, Firemuth, Ridley, Mostert, Bigsby, Thielen. Who should I flex out of these guys? JSN, Ridley kind of stand out to me. Bigsby stands out to me. Those three stand out to me as flex options. If ETN doesn't play, I go Bigsby. If he does, and then if he doesn't play, it will come down to JSN or Ridley. If Mason Rudolph plays, I go Ridley, especially if whether or not DK plays or not. If DK does not play, I'm probably playing Ridley out of those three options. I know it's a tough situation unless Levis plays. If Levis plays and DK plays, then I might go Bigsby for the floor. If Levis plays and DK doesn't play, I might go JSN for the floor. So, like I said, I'm sorry. I know that's kind of like a long-winded answer. I just literally don't know what that situation is going to look like. You know, so I'm trying to give you all the realms of possibilities. Who do you pick up for Freiermuth out of Cole Kmet, Jonnu Smith, Noah Fant, or Taysom? I like Fant the most out of these options, but I don't know if I would drop Freiermuth. Might have to. I like Noah Fant the most out of these options, especially if DK doesn't play. Cole Kmet is up there too, but I like Noah Fant the most. Appreciate you, Jorge. Start two: Javonte Williams, Bigsby, Rashad White, Xavier Legette, and Bucky Irving. To me, the names that stick out here, Javonte Williams and Rashad White. I think Bigsby is on this radar, but if ETN plays, you got to go Javonte. Javonte in a tough matchup would be the floor play. If you're looking for upside, I don't mind starting Xavier Legette. It's just you get a mixed bag with Bryce Young. All right? You get a mixed bag with Bryce Young. All right, couple questions let me get to here on TikTok. Go ahead, guys. If you've been waiting, go ahead and get them in. Thoughts on Mixon Flowers for Olave and Cook? You just lost Diggs and you have Deontay. I would just keep Mixon and Flowers. I don't care about the fact that you have Deontay. I would just keep Mixon and Flowers. I think Mixon is much better than Cook, and I think Flowers is better than Olave. They're or similar at best. Stafford or Caleb? I'm starting Kupp and Kyron though. I would still go Stafford here. What should we do with Kareem Hunt? I think Kareem Hunt for me is a trade if possible, a hold and just know his value. You already got him for free. So if you got Kareem Hunt for free, just know you're probably getting an extended run with him. I think his value might come to an end in about 2-3 weeks. Just hold him for now. Better on your roster unless you could trade him. Appreciate y'all tapping the like button too, man. For all you who showed love on the likes, appreciate you. I'm gonna try to get to a few regular comments on here too, so bear with me. Was offered Barkley for Breece and Hunt. That becomes a Barkley for Breece deal in a couple weeks. I don't mind it if you need to get wins right now. The only thing is Barkley already had his bye, so be very careful with that. The Jets bye is what, week 14, so be very careful with that. Appreciate it as always. Jayhan, got you, my dude. Will you be putting out any trade away and trade for clips soon? So I don't know about clips. I'm going to try to get to some trade stuff tomorrow is the goal. Tomorrow's the goal to get to like trade, buy low, sell high type stuff. So I should have content for you on that tomorrow on the YouTube. I'll try to clip something up from that this weekend. All right. But trade stuff is coming tomorrow. And fantasy basketball stuff too. If you're worried about fantasy basketball stuff is coming. All right, Stafford or Caleb? I answered that one. Stafford. Monty Pollard or Reed in standard. Monty Pollard or Reed. Monty Pollard, Reed in standard. Monty Pollard, Reed. I'll go David Montgomery. Dell or Harrison. I probably just play Tank Dell on Monday night. I know you're losing some upside. I play Tank Dell on Monday night. Otton Ingram. I'm playing Kate. I'm playing Evan Ingram. I'm playing Evan Ingram still. I love Kate Otton, but I'm playing Evan Ingram. Trade targets for Mike Evans. I don't have any off the top of my head. I'll talk about that tomorrow. He'll be one of the names I talk about tomorrow. Mike Evans. Jayhan, you said to trade. Oh shit, I missed it. Trade Hunt if possible. Yeah, because Pacheco's coming back. Trade him if possible. Mike Evans. Deontay and Brooks for Pittman. I'd rather have Pittman. That's a good overpay. I'd rather have Pittman. Thanks, brother. Appreciate what you do as always. No problem, CL. Got you. Draw McMillan for Elijah or Thielen and hold. I'll probably just hold Jalen McMillan and see what he looks like after this week. All right. TikTok, appreciate you. I'm going to answer a few more here on YouTube. TikTok, I will see y'all on the next one. Peace out. All right. Where did I leave off at? Right here. I got a few more here. All right. A few more. What's good, Jahan? Need help? Not sure if I should panic or just wait it out. 3-0, you're 4-4. Always, stay the course. You're 500. You're good to go. I would not panic. Answering questions today. Trying to get to them right now. Current roster is DK Kamara. Ask me this in a comment. Claire, ask me this in a comment of a video so I can actually look it over and not give you quick advice, all right? And I wouldn't really panic with this team. This team doesn't look like a panic team. You have good players. I wouldn't panic. Making a comeback in the sleeper league. See, you have one person who's 4-4 panicking, and the other one who's 3-5 feeling good. So sometimes you just got to make the playoffs. NBA MVP predictions. Nothing as of right now. AD looks crazy right now. AD looks crazy. Jahan, will you trade Cup for Tyrone Tracy and J.K. Dobbins and half PPR? I would keep Cup. Even if you're lacking running back, I think you can do better. You can do much better than Tracy and Dobbins. Personally, you can do better. 5-3, not sure how much I should be giving up in trades. Jaden Daniels and Cup for Jettas. Cup and Chubb for CMC. I want to consolidate, but still need wins. I don't know why. Yeah, those trades don't make sense to me. I think unless it depends on how you value Cup. So I just don't think Cup is that. I don't think he's Jaden Daniels off of Jettas, and I don't think Nick Chubb really does anything. That's really Cup for CMC. So it depends if you need a running back that bad. That's probably the range you're going to have to pay for CMC. Sorry about being late, guys. Sorry about being late. Yeah, it might have to be a quick little change in this. Elijah Moore, Parker Washington. I'd prefer Parker Washington, especially in the matchup. Yeah, get that water ready. I did during the intro. I don't know if you saw that. I got the water ready during the intro. That's hella funny. You got Tillman or Amari Cooper. I think I'm still going Amari Cooper over Tillman, especially given the matchup. Start 2, Reed, Tillman, Elijah Moore, Waddle, Mostert, Ridley, Reed, Tillman, Waddle. Give me Reed and give me Waddle here. Reed and Waddle here. Jorge, appreciate you. You said you won't be half-point PPR, won't be dropping Freiermuth this last soup. Got you. No, you're all good. This is the last soup. I got you, bro. All right. Won't be dropping Muth. Okay, bet. Yeah, so like I said, I think if I pick up one, it'd be Noah Fant. If you had room for him, just pick up Noah Fant. That's the last super, and that's the last comment I'm going to get to. Appreciate you guys. I will see you guys on the next one. I'm going to try to get in a couple episodes tomorrow, fantasy basketball and fantasy football. My goal is to get into live here. I don't know. I got a lot of things going on right now on the outside of fantasy football right now, but I'm trying to get to you guys a lot more. So hopefully I can get a live in tomorrow at some point or Friday. Either way, I'll see you guys soon. Peace out.